Now to the United States, and it has been a pretty bad day for the Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney. More of that hidden video from a wealthy donor briefing has come to light today. Yesterday, of course, he was writing off the 47% of American voters who he says aren't paying any income tax and dependent on the government and never going to vote for him. Today, he was writing off the chances of Middle East peace because he said that the Palestinians don't want a settlement with Israel.
I think the Palestinians not wanting to see peace anyway for political purposes, committed to the destruction and elimination of Israel and these thorny issues, and I say there's just no way. And so what you do is you say you move things along in the best way you can, you hope for some degree of stability, but you recognize this is going to remain an unsolved problem.
Now, Governor Romney has already admitted that his comments were inelegant, but doubling down today he was on the gist of what he had to say on Fox News.
I was talking about the fact that I don't expect to get 60 or 70% of the vote. Gotcha. I understand that some portion will be the president's, some portion will be mine. I've got to get as many as I can from every single cohort in this country. But the intent that I want to talk about, and that was intended to speak about, was the fact that you have a great divide about whether we want a government that's larger and more intrusive and redistributing income, or whether instead you want a government that sees its role as protecting freedom and opportunity and letting free people build more wealth for all people.
But in what could well prove to be a profound irony if this affair sinks Mitt Romney's campaign, it seems that there is a connection in all of this to President Jimmy Carter. As you might recall, he lost the 1980 election to Ronald Reagan, and he keeps getting brought up now by Republicans as a way of attacking Barack Obama. Worse than Jimmy Carter, they say. Turns out his grandson, James Carter, was so offended at the vilification of Papa Carter, as he's apparently known in the family, he trawled the internet for weeks and weeks and weeks and found this damaging video.
Well, I'm a partisan Democrat, and my goal is to get Democrats elected. Not just at the presidential level, but to all offices.
What do you think of Mitt Romney?
I don't know Mitt Romney. I think that's part of the problem.
Do you resent the fact he's been dumping on your grandpa?
That is not something that I think favorably of him for.
Adam Lockyer from the United States Studies Centre joins us now. He's writing a book at the moment about the US military's nation-building role in Afghanistan and Iraq. Now, Adam, we'll get your take on the situation and the NATO move in Afghanistan in a moment. But first to this Mitt Romney video. This has now turned from a one-day story into a two-day story, and more of it's coming out. How damaging do you think this is going to be?
Oh, this has definitely got traction at this point. So this is on the back of not just these two slip-ups, but you've got to think back to, this goes all the way back to Romney's comments back in London about the Olympics. Then he flew off to Israel and made those damaging comments about the Israeli-Palestine conflict. And then he's come back and made these comments. So this is now a pattern of behaviour. There's now a narrative here where there's been a series of gaffes.
But isn't this just the Liberal press going crazy as always? I mean, Obama said you did not build that business. How, you know, that was just an outrageous thing to say from my point of view, but the Liberal press forget about this. I mean, those 2 points he made are probably absolutely fair enough. There are too many welfare-dependent Americans, and secondly, there probably is no lasting solution in the Middle East, you know, so what?
So his first comments, there is some truth to them. So about half the electorate isn't going to vote for him no matter what, and half of them don't pay any sort of federal income tax. The problem is that the two 47% aren't the same. So within the bloc that isn't going to vote for him, or doesn't pay income tax, includes disabled return vets, includes poor southern whites, it includes a lot of senior citizens. Yeah. So he's both insulting his base at the same time, which goes to show that many people are now saying that he doesn't speak fluent conservative.
And Jimmy Carter was one of the worst presidents America had in the 20th century too. You know, so that's not a lie either.
Well, that's something that is something you can assert. Jimmy Carter's grandson would disagree
No
with
doubt.
that. But it's, whether it is
also
the
perception of the video is at a $50,000 a head dinner.
Yeah.
So it's that whole blue blood thing and him not, you know.
But that's okay. Obama has plenty of $50,000 a head dinners with all the celebrities.
No,
See, that's
but,
George
you know,
Clooney and his
politics is about
and Adam, it's true to say that in
perception.
2008...
Yeah, but talking down people
but the Liberal
who are
press
taking
don't pick that up, do they?
Adam, let's talk about the way in which maybe the media treats Barack Obama differently to Mitt Romney. Back in 2008, Barack Obama, his campaign suffered a very major setback when he talked about some blue-collar Americans clinging to their Bibles and their guns. And it almost lost in the primary against Hillary Clinton. He recovered from that, but it took some time. He took a big hit in states like Ohio and Indiana and elsewhere in the Rust Belt. Could the same thing happen to Mitt Romney, and has he got time to recover with 49 days to go?
Absolutely. And so when we've got making comparisons back to 2008, it's good to compare September 2008 with September 2012, where you remember that Obama was behind at this stage in the race. McCain was ahead, and it was around the corner was the Lehman Brothers collapse, and this changed the entire narrative of the race. Obama looked as though he was the cool hand, whereas
McCain said the fundamentals of the economy are fine.
He flip-flopped a bit, and so he lost his advantage of being the adult in the room. And so things like that could still potentially happen, but it's difficult to see what type of thing like would match Lehman Brothers collapse in this particular race.
Has Mitt Romney got his work cut out against him? There are often claims from the right that the mainstream media in the United States, as you'll often hear in this country as well, is biased, and that Obama has them as a cheer squad. There were surveys in the 1990s that said after the 1992 election, when Bill Clinton got elected, 80% of Washington correspondents, including the White House correspondents, would have voted for him. Does that prove that there is actually bias here and that this isn't a fair contest?
Well, in this particular race, I think that Mitt Romney's making his own news. So we see report after report coming out of gaffes, of mistakes, of leaks like this, and Obama's running a more disciplined race, right down to...
Obama's made gaffes. Obama has $50,000 a head, fundraising campaigns with celebrities, and that's okay with the Liberal press. But, you know, when the Republican candidate does it, that's somehow bad.
No, I don't think they're talking about the fact that he's having a dinner. They're talking about at that dinner he's talking about 47% of the population taking welfare, including
calling
people who
poor people
vote for him.
feckless while they're passing the red wine around and paying $50,000 for dinner.
Dear me, those bludgers on welfare.
And then you have, zillionaires like George Clooney kind of telling us about...
George Clooney believes in welfare,
but
he doesn't, he thinks that senior citizens should be on welfare and so should return vets and the like.
And let's talk about the way in which Afghanistan feeds into all of this. Another one of Mitt Romney's recent missteps was somewhere in the drafting and the redrafting of the speech for the Republican convention, he forgot to mention Afghanistan. Not a great thing. It's not really front of mind, though, in this campaign or perhaps in the candidates. But is that going to be a problem? And how is the fact that Americans are now getting shot a lot by the people they're meant to be training just as our troops are? How's it going to play out?
So in the election race, foreign policy wasn't supposed to be an issue. It was supposed to be all about the economy and the unemployment rate. However, foreign policy is one of these boxes that you need to tick. So all that Mitt Romney needed to do was tick the box, look competent on foreign policy, and then we could move on and just talk about the economy. But he hasn't looked that credible on foreign policy, which is the problem. So we have his foreign adventures through Europe and in Israel, where he took a few missteps. He's come back, and in his convention speech, he didn't mention Afghanistan, and now we've had these recent comments today about Israel and Palestine. So he's failed to tick the box, and that could come back and haunt him in November.
What about the will of American people after a very long decade plus of having their troops overseas, 100,000 of them still in the line of fire? How are they going to feel about the mission that's now winding down to 2014 in Afghanistan?
So everybody is well and truly over the conflict in Afghanistan. They all want to bring them home. That's from the political class right down to the electorate. The problem is that the politicians can't bring them home right now without looking as though they've it's been demanded from the Taliban that it's a retreat, and they can't be seen to be doing this. So they've got to keep more or less to the timetable, but what we saw in the last few days is that they're going to try to keep their troops out of the conflict as much as possible, pull back from the front line, but more or less keep to the timetable so it isn't a defeat.
Do you think they will have achieved their basic objectives, or will that be a question for history?
That will be a longer-term question. It depends upon what was the objective in the first place. If it was just the removal of the Taliban regime and the elimination of al-Qaeda from Afghanistan, then they've more or less achieved it, although the Taliban may come back.
Well, Adam, it's good to talk to you. Thank you very much for coming in. That is all the time we have for this edition of The Drum. My thanks as well to our panellists tonight, Sarah McDonald, Judith Sloan, and in Melbourne, James Button. You can check out The Drum website online, abc.net.au/The Drum.